Welcome. My name is Alexander, and this is
Riddle of the Sphinx.
Ahem. As I was saying, this is Riddle of the Sphinx, specifically Riddle of the Sphinx Awakening Enhanced Edition. This game came out in 2000 as a CD-ROM game that my family and I played when I was a kid, and the original developers crowdfunded a modernized edition in 2017 that's available on GOG and Steam. When you start a new game, you eventually learn that you are a protege of Egyptologist Gil Blythe Jeffries, or as the narrator inexplicably calls him,
Noted archaeologist Sir Gil Blythe Geoffreys.
Apparently we skipped over Old English spellings to get to ancient Egypt. This is further indicated when we finally... Okay, seriously, why does hitting new game start playing a whole string of ads for the game I already have? Where was I? Oh, right. You get to hear a missive from Gil himself, played by co-director Jeffrey S. Tobler, who appears to be attempting an English accent.
In any event, I am in need of your help.
I don't mind that so much, though. The fact that the dev team and the on-screen cast are the same people speaks to its strong ties to Myst, being a bit of a cottage production, something you don't see much anymore. Heck, the closing credits thank Rand Miller of Cyan for his advice to the team, and Gil even looks a bit like Atris. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The gist is that you've been called up to complete the work of Gil at the famous Giza complex after he mysteriously disappears amid buzz about his having gone mad or fallen ill, victim of the infamous Curse of the Pharaohs. So you arrive and go straight to work, rummaging around Gil's tent and climbing around the Great Sphinx looking for clues as to what he was working on. The Myst resemblance is immediate, clicking on the environments, reading notes and letters. The immersion gets kicked up a notch from the use of familiar technology. Well, familiar to someone my age anyway. This will become a bit more important later, but I've mentioned before I studied anthropology and archaeology. I didn't focus on Egyptology, but I've maintained enough interest that I actually went to Egypt on holiday in 2019, and I found it amusing that the game actually builds in a reason for the standard depiction of the Giza pyramids being isolated in the middle of the desert. The whole complex was hit by massive sandstorms that reburied it. Now, I wasn't nearly this close to the Sphinx, but standing in front of it, if I turned around, I could clearly see a Pizza Hut on the streets of Cairo. I also appreciated that if you rifle through Gil's books, some of them mention the fact that in real life, the Giza pyramids aren't solitary monoliths, they're just the centerpiece of what is basically a large cemetery. Nor are they the first or only pyramids in Egypt. What's more, digging the pyramids and Sphinx out from the sand is the pretext for Gil's team to make new discoveries. And boy do you ever make discoveries. Once you've worked out the directions he's left you, you take that knowledge to the Great Pyramid itself, which to this point is very accurately recreated until you uncover a whole hidden labyrinth of chambers. Making your way through this hidden complex, out into lost temples in the desert, you gather clues to the
Riddle of the Sphinx.
Yeah, that. What stuck with me most over the years are the environments and ambience. It's very evocative of Myst, the dated graphics having both quaint charm and just enough detail to feel genuinely real. The way objects move, the gleam of gold, and for Egypt nerds, the recognizable Egyptian artwork and architecture all come together to make for a very immersive experience. Although playing as a more well-read adult, it's funny what your suspension of disbelief will tolerate. The game environments are lit by the classic torches that have stayed lit in airtight chambers for nearly 5,000 years, elaborate machinery made of stone and rope that still works, also after nearly 5,000 years, and some iconography that doesn't quite fit. The use of skull imagery is particularly jarring. I'm pretty confident that if you look for depictions of skeletons in Egyptian art, you won't find any. Plus, the classic trope of undiscovered chambers inside the Great Pyramid, that would mean the whole thing is basically hollow and should by rights implode. The music's use of woodwind and percussion effects is a perfect evocation of ancient Egypt and an air of investigation and mystery. None of the tracks ever get boring. Which is good, because any given one is going to be looping for a while. The environments are really big. The bits supposedly inside the Great Pyramid are probably bigger than the volume of the actual pyramid. The long walks are okay if you're outside to take in the scenery. Riven got a lot of mileage out of that. But you're mostly in, admittedly well-appointed, corridors. The puzzles you go through are pretty classic, various codes and keys that lead you to other codes and keys, often by mentally lining up different symbols like ciphers, all of which snowball until you gather all the information and items you need to unlock the
Riddle of the Sphinx.
Yes, thank you. I've been getting into gaming history content the last few years through series like Ross's Game Dungeon, Lazy Game Reviews, Extra Punctuation, and its successor Semi-Ramblematic, and something that they all talk about is the adventure game tendency to fever dream logic. I've run up against some borderline cases in Secret Files games and The Longest Journey. Looking back on it through childhood memories, I was afraid that Riddle of the Sphinx was the same kind of game. But with an adult-level focus, the puzzles aren't particularly unreasonable. I think I tend to assume that because I played games like this as a kid, it was meant for kids. The main thing I couldn't do as a kid, first, is interpret these scrolls, second, keep the different elements in my mind between the widely spaced rooms, and third, keep track of the inventory. And the gods help you if you don't have what you need equipped and ready, because this is the rare adventure game that kills you in some situations. I never quite understand death conditions in games like this. Why isn't it enough that I'm just stopped in my tracks by these snakes, for instance? One of the keys you need to collect are these tablets. They're always in pairs, one is the right one, the other one will magically electrocute you. There is a scroll that tells you, if you find the right background information, which is the safe one, but really, choosing wrong just makes you wait through the skull animation and then you try again. Some of the keys get expended in the process of use, but a lot of them don't, and even after you've used them, they linger in your inventory. Riddle of the Sphinx was what I was thinking of when I remarked how much I like that Siberia doesn't do this. Not to mention that you can take photographs that form their own separate inventory, and I don't know why, but when I started a new game, all the photos I took in my first playthrough were in my new game's inventory. And whether photos or objects, there's a lot of red herrings. For example, in this room, you need to use this big winch to move the funeral boat, but it's missing some kind of pin in the axle. You hunt around the hall and you find multiple pins, each with different shaped heads, so you match the right pin to the winch. But I was still carrying all the other ones, so I was lugging the things around the whole rest of the game, having to scroll past them looking for the artifact of the moment. Of course, before you can gather the clutter, you have to find it. There's this doorway of Sobek that needs a particular combination to open. Which stones you have to press is shown in the same area, but not what order. The sequence isn't a scroll you pick up elsewhere, but on my recording playthrough, I had to resort to the walkthrough because I'd missed it that time and I didn't want to go back through the long, moodily lit hallways to look for it. There's also a puzzle that riffs on the old myth that the Giza pyramids are aligned to the belt of Orion, but I still don't know how I was supposed to work that out within the game. It just so happened that I already knew that story, and I'm not even sure what I managed to skip over. And that's assuming I even found the right spot, because I cannot overstate how bad the navigation is. I'm used to the Myst-style jump from point to point, but it'd be nice if, when I turned, I could be confident of knowing how far I turned. But there are multiple points where you can't tell how far you've turned, and it makes it absolutely maddening. There are a lot of puzzles that involve adjusting variables on rows of pillars, and it takes genuine care to make sure you're standing in front of the right one. The worst moment is this maze, because it's full of U-turns and I kept doubling back by accident while thinking I'd gone around the turn. I genuinely have no idea what I finally did differently. When the haze of frustration cleared, I was just there. The story underlying all this is on two levels. One is finding out what the Egyptians built all this in aid of. We'll get to that in a bit. The second is what happened to Gil. And the truth is, I don't know. The general gist, I think, is that Gil's colleagues turned on him to loot the treasure, and he had to go into hiding. But Gil is the only one who says so. In Myst tradition, you find notes and diaries representing different points of view, but none of the diaries of other people I could find express that level of greed or ruthlessness. If anything, they're angry at Gil for being secretive, overworking, or not paying them. And the curse has already dealt with them, so there's no suggestion of preventing them from doing anything bad. On which note, I'm going to transition to talking about the ending, the solution to the Riddle of the Sphinx. I've finally gotten around to learning how to do chapters in videos, so you can skip ahead to the end credits to avoid spoilers if you want. Alright, here goes. So, you've collected all the keys and ciphers to find the other keys and ciphers, and when you put it all together, you open the chamber under the Sphinx, and... yup.
You have succeeded where many have failed. We have been following your journey and have known that you were the one who would reclaim the sacred Ark of the Covenant.
I was raised an atheist and I was never interested in biblical archaeology, so maybe I'm not open to the enormity of this, but somehow even as a kid, this was a breathtaking anticlimax. The keys that unlock the Ark Vault depict multiple other famously mysterious sites around the world: Bimini, Stonehenge, Chichen Itza, Easter Island, the usual suspects. As a kid, I thought that was the thrilling part. The idea of interconnections of different civilizations was exhilarating. But what strikes me now is that the Riddle of the Sphinx has absolutely nothing to do with the actual ancient Egyptians or their achievements. I mean, you discover the hidden, unspoiled burial chamber in the Great Pyramid right near the start of the game. If I'd been making it, that would have been the ultimate discovery. Also, the interconnection doesn't even work that well if you know anything about these sites. Stonehenge is about the same age as the Giza pyramids, for example, but Chichen Itza is 3,000 years younger. Admittedly, at the time, Riddle of the Sphinx seemed very much like the setup for its sequel, the Omega Stone, where you travel the world seeking the secrets of Atlantis. Actually, Atlantis gets name-dropped really early in this game in a way that kind of implies that Atlantis is already well known enough for Gil to recognize its writing system, which, if you're paying close attention...
If you're looking at this right now, it looks Atlantean. I know. That's, I can't imagine it is, but it looks Atlantean.
Feels like the game just spoiled itself. And above all that, well, maybe it's because I'm really into Egyptology or this being an age of free circulation for conspiracy theories, but looking at this today, I find the use of pseudo-archaeological theories in the game really off-putting. And in fact, this new version of the game seems to be leaning into it more than the CD-ROM version. I found a playthrough of the original version on YouTube, and the timeline of Egyptian history at the start of the game is different in the new version. In the CD-ROM version, the timeline text starts with the end of the Ice Age and the climatic conditions that would eventually bring about ancient Egypt. In the new version, it starts with the end of Noah's flood and skips to a mysterious stranger visiting King Khufu, implied to have taught him how to build a pyramid. The game's religious vibe was already a little strong. The power ascribed to the Ark of the Covenant, for one, and the way Gil's monologue at the end of the game implies you, the player, know your Bible awfully well, to the fact that Jesus is thanked in the end credits, to the point that I half wondered if the game was preaching to the player and I was too young to notice originally. Nah, probably not. There is a Bible in Gil's tent, and it genuinely looks like most, if not all, the text of the Bible is actually in there, but the only part you need to look at is the Book of Numbers. Somehow, a votive offering manual seems like an unlikely starting point to try to convert someone. Regardless, I can't stop thinking about the way that Lost Empire theories almost always end up taking away credit from real cultures for amazing achievements. I'm not sure there's a way to get away from that. Incidentally, there's an example early in the game of the old trope of a Western archaeologist's Egyptian workers quitting because they're superstitious and scared of the ancient monuments. I hate that. Netflix has taken serious, legitimate heat for platforming pseudo-archaeology, but the documentary Secrets of the Saqqara Tomb seems solid, and one thing it nails is focusing on the actual Egyptians working in Egyptian archaeology. Those people aren't superstitious peasants at the beck and call of foreigners, they are serious, skilled professionals. When I realized the puzzles in Riddle of the Sphinx were starting to click for me, I hoped I was going to rediscover a childhood thrill. I appreciate the character of a game made by basically a family operation. The game's visual and sound design are gorgeous, the puzzles mostly genuinely clever, but with the benefit of growing up, the narrative they are hanging on is either based on disreputable tropes or so couched in dense in-game documents that it doesn't all click together. Or maybe it would, but I walked circles around a piece of the puzzle without noticing. And the main menu prominently features links to pay extra for the hint guide and a bunch of other additional content, so it's picked up some skeevy modern habits. Meanwhile, I don't think there's anything a modern remaster could have done to overcome its most serious original shortcomings. As much as I enjoyed it, it felt like a reminder that sometimes you have to put away childish things. Nevertheless, thank you for watching.
Riddle of the Sphinx.
Oh, shut up.